the Supreme Court said? Supreme Court justified that the material presented or shared by the government in that envelope is of such a nature that it cannot be shared with SIMI. Now what does it mean? You can ban an organization against whom there are not a single case where it could be established that they have committed any crime, let alone terrorists involved in terrorist activity. You may not like their ideology, that's a different matter. I dislike thoroughly. I have a pathological hatred of RSS, Vishwa Hindu Parishad, Shiv Sena, Maharashtra Navnirman Samiti, but that is my political understanding. Because I believe that, it does not mean therefore that organization should be banned. Fine. Now I may dislike SIMI's ideology. That is not a sufficient ground for banning that organization. Yet that organization is banned and it becomes possible for the government to persecute all its members. Naturally because now the organization is banned, it's only the former members that you can target. So therefore you can undertake any activity, any raid in which you can pick up somebody and accuse that person of being either a member or having been a member of SIMI at some point or the other. Now even if it comes before the judiciary and after several years it is shown that that case against that person XYZ is without any basis, it would have taken several years for that person. He would have remained behind bars. His family and his friends would have suffered. Probably a lot of them would have been ruined, because fighting a legal case is not a joke in this country. Families get ruined fighting cases, and especially where year after year after year the case drags on, and it's very possible for the state to drag a case. Now what is that in the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, or in the definition of unlawful activities or terrorist organization or terrorist activity, which necessitates passing of an act which takes away from an organization its capacity to organize what is considered legitimate by all of us. Take CPI Maoist. There is no single case where it could be shown that Subhash Gandhi was participated in any act of any crime of criminal nature. Fine. There are any number of Maoist members who have been put, and we have seen many of these charge sheets. The most recent in Delhi we saw was one of Gopal Mishra and Anu Mishra, and husband and wife who were trade union activists. Okay? If you read the charge sheet, you find that the only crime and the only basis for arresting them is the fact that they happen to be members of an organization which has been banned. Now banning is very easy, as I tried to explain. Banning is a very simple thing. If the government decides that in their subjective understanding CPI Maoist poses a threat to this country, therefore it should be banned, and therefore it should be barred from even those activities which have no connection with any criminal activity, like organizing, engaged in trade union activities, mobilizing the peasants, working among students or women, where they are not committing crime. These are all normal, legitimate activities. Now in the course of this act and this activity, there probably correspondence which exists between a branch members. If there are problems, they are talking about their problems, or there is an act of indiscipline, or there is some political issue they are discussing, those correspondence, or there is literature which is in their possession, all because it's a banned organization, all this becomes banned literature. Of course, what is banned or not banned, we discover, when we go into details, we discover Ambedkar is banned in parts of Vidarbha, I mean, if you are found found with Ambedkar, and if you happen to be a Dalit activist, you had it. If you happen to have Engels or Marx, Lenin, not even Mao Zedong, or Baburam Bhattarai, or XYZ, who's probably written a document or prepared some fact-finding report, you've had it. Because all that gets covered in banned literature in the subjective understanding of the prosecuting authority. Now you can challenge it. We may find it absurd, but it will take years before it can establish the absurdity of the government's claim. In the meantime, years would have passed and families would have been affected. Now, as I said, against Gopal Gandhi or against Gopal Mishra or against Anu Mishra, there is no case other than the fact that they are members of a banned party and that some banned literature was found in their possession. As I tried to explain, banned literature is very wide. I mean, anything can become banned. Tomorrow, probably even the report of the SC Commission or the SC Commission would be considered a ban item if it is found in the possession of a member of a banned organization, or a Dalit activist, or an Adivasi activist. It is possible. So what does it mean? That Unlawful Activities Prevention Act is meant actually to strike at political dissent and any political opposition that the state feels it is certain by. Now, remotely, I mean, let's look at facts. CPI Mao is supposed to be an organization which threatens the unity and integrity and poses a threat to the state. Very well. Let's try and see whether this is true. By Ministry of Home Affairs' own admission, CPI Maoists have 10,000 cadres, armed cadres. Fine. 10,000 armed cadres in a country the size of 1.13 billion. What is the size of a security forces? 1 million central paramilitary forces, 1.3 million armed forces, and another 1.7 million police force, of which 40% are armed police. Armed police means what? Armed police is organized along the lines of infantry battalions of the army. So for all practical purpose, armed police, the central paramilitary forces, are like army's infantry battalions. The training is of similar nature. In a country the size of India, with the population that we have, 10,000 people, whose weaponry is also known, because it's all been looted from the armories. So the state also knows exactly what is in possession of the mountains, how many AK-47, how many 303s, how many Insar rifles. That is supposed to, and you look at the size of that, and you look at the size of the Indian security forces, which are deployed, which is there, and then part of it which is deployed against the people, you discover that there is a disproportionate. It doesn't make sense to say that 10,000 armed cadres spread over a territory of 9 states, covering roughly a population of not less than 150 to 200 million people. Immense, gigantic, can actually pose a threat. Prime Minister is on record of saying that they have modest capabilities. And I believe my Prime Minister. Okay? I believe Mr. Manmohan Singh speaks the truth. He claims that they have modest capabilities. Now how does it pose a threat to the state? That is one part of the problem. Other part of the problem is, suppose, even while we question government's premise, suppose we take the next level of argument. that the Maoists are bent upon overthrowing the state and changing and seizing power. Very well. Once upon a time, CPM also believed until they gave it up. So the point is, they carried on believing in it, and their party documents and the party congress will subscribe to it. The difference is that they claim that they can come to it through parliamentary means. Fair enough. If they believe that they can do it, fair enough. Now, if the government believes that the Maoists should also be brought to follow the same path that CPI and CPM is doing, whether the Maoists want or not want is a different matter. But if the state wants that they should do it, what is the best way of doing it, bringing this about? Surely one would say that encouraging them to widen their activities in the legitimate areas which are provided to all other organizations would probably create the condition where within the party also there would be pressure, and in the debate those who espouse a non-armed line may be able to push their claim. At least they should have been tested. Please recall what Cherukuri Rajkumar said in his interview to Hindu. He says in 1978, when the People's War decided to pick up weapons, it was done when the state cracked down on their mass organization. The beauty of this Indian state is that when they work peacefully, when they work open ground, you crack down on them because you feel threatened by mass organizations and the mass upsurge that it creates. Go back to history. No movement in this country picked up weapons because they have a propensity to pick up weapons. It only did when they exhausted the possibility and they were pushed to a point where their normal legitimate activities were being stopped and they were being obstructed from doing it. And not just obstructed, meaning, they were being killed right, left and center. Recall that encounter, the term encounter which has entered Indian lexicon, comes from Andhra Pradesh and elsewhere, where the police used to catch hold of people and kill them and pass it off as encounters. This was something which started in late 60s, picked up in the 70s. Right? We have all established records for that. The point I am trying to make is that if you go by any reasonable argument, you find that having created this condition, it becomes very easy for the state to crush any organization which they believe is an organization which can actually mobilize people and threaten the present order and the present system. Now some people might say, well, what is wrong? We have given ourselves the best constitution. We have the best, and we have this democratic system which is functioning. We don't need to change it. Why don't people come to parliament and form the government, win the seats and form the government? Having seen what has happened in the Indian parliament, having seen what has become of the Indian political parties, having seen what has become of the system, having seen how prolific scams are, how difficult it is for 63 years, as Sebastian pointed out, in the 63 years our record is most honorable. Our record is most honorable in the sense we have ensured that 77% of our working people live on less than rupees 20. We have ensured very honorably that 45% of our children within the age of 0 to 6 suffer from malnutrition, and anybody who's a child specialist knows that if a child suffers from malnutrition,